Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're a soldier, not a war hero, not even particularly competent. You're just available, and that's enough for the German Navy. No one asked if you could swim. No one cared if you were claustrophobic, or bad with machines, or already halfway to a nervous breakdown. You had a pulse, and the Reich had a shortage of warm bodies willing to climb inside a pressurized metal death tube and call it patriotism. So here you are, crammed into the belly of a World War II U-boat with 50 other men, one functioning toilet, and zero chances of long-term survival. The air is already going stale, the bread is already growing fur, and you haven't even left port yet. So before the depth charges start falling and the oxygen runs out, and the cook loses his final marble over a spoiled potato, do me a favour and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, and what ungodly hour you've chosen to fall asleep to stories like this. I love knowing who's tuning in from around the world. If you'd like to hear these episodes early, without ads, or just want to support the show, there's a Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You are not a hero, you're not even particularly brave. You are young, tired, and largely uninformed. You have lungs, 2 hands, and a heartbeat. And for the purposes of the Kriegsmarine, that's more than enough. Whether you were swept up in patriotic fervour or simply unlucky enough to be caught in the draft net, it doesn't matter anymore. You're here, uniform issued, hair cropped, identity filed down to a last name and serial number. The posters said you'd see the world. The recruitment officer said you'd make your country proud. What no one said, what no one ever says, is that your most frequent companion for the foreseeable future will be mould, and that in a matter of weeks, you'll forget what sunlight actually feels like. The process begins with efficiency, not the good kind, just the fast kind, cold, bureaucratic, and more concerned with throughput than outcomes. You're herded through medical inspections like livestock, stripped and examined under buzzing lights by men who haven't smiled since before the war. They check your teeth, your ears, and your ability to nod on command. The bar for passing is low. If you can stand upright and you're not currently bleeding from both nostrils, congratulations, you're submarine material. No one asks about your swimming ability, of course. Swimming would only prolong your death, not prevent it. After that comes the paperwork. Endless forms full of terms you don't understand, acronyms no one explains, and waivers you don't read. You sign everything because you have to, and because everyone else is doing it. Around you, other boys, some younger than you, some already looking like they regret everything, shuffle forward in silence. A few try to joke. One makes a remark about how the U-boats are elite, the best of the best. No one laughs. You realise quickly that even the word elite here is a euphemism for expendable, for isolated, for statistically doomed. But it's too late now. You're in. They call it training, but it's really a rehearsal for drowning, or suffocating, or catching fire in an enclosed metal pipe 200 feet below sea level. Whatever euphemism the instructors use, the purpose is clear. Teach you just enough to keep the boat from killing you before the Allies get the chance. The days begin early and end later. Every hour is accounted for, and every task is designed to make you feel slightly more hopeless than the one before. They tell you this is preparation. What they don't tell you is that almost everything you're learning will be rendered irrelevant the moment something actually goes wrong, which it will. The first week is mostly theory, charts, diagrams, long lectures delivered by men who smell like burnt rubber and sleep in their uniforms. You learn the anatomy of a U-boat in detail, from the torpedo tubes to the galley to the absurdly small bunks stacked like coffins in a crypt. You learn how ballast tanks work and what happens when they don't. You memorize emergency procedures by rote, knowing full well that when the hull is buckling and the lights are flickering, no one is going to calmly refer to their checklist. Still, you practice. You drill until your knees ache and your fingers blister from folding and unfolding escape masks and scrubbing imaginary oil spills from the floor. Then comes the hands-on training. You're taken to a practice submarine, a decommissioned death trap painted to look reassuring, though it smells like stale soup and failure. Here, you run through simulations that start absurd and end terrifying. One involves sealing a flooding compartment while blindfolded, upside down, and soaking wet. Another simulates a fire in the engine room, complete with real smoke and the very real possibility of vomiting from the fumes. You crawl through tunnels too narrow for comfort, trying not to think about how much smaller everything will feel when you're submerged, panicking, and hundreds of meters from the surface. You learn how to load a torpedo, how to secure hatches, and how to spin the air filter crank until your arms burn. Because if the CO2 scrubbers go offline, your lungs are next. Every skill you acquire is taught in the worst possible conditions. That's the point. You are never dry. You are never rested. You are never more than 10 feet from someone who smells like canned meat and desperation. The instructors bark commands, not out of discipline, but because they've forgotten how to speak at a normal volume. One of them, a veteran of 5 patrols, has a permanent twitch in his left eye and keeps telling stories about the time we almost didn't make it back. He never finishes the stories, just trails off, staring into the middle distance, while the rest of you try to figure out if that's supposed to be a lesson. The food during training is suspiciously edible. You get bread that isn't hard yet, cheese that doesn't smell like death, and even the occasional slice of sausage that might be pork. This is not generosity, it's bait, a preview of a life you'll never have again. Because once you board an active U-boat, this illusion of nourishment will vanish. Your digestive system will spend the rest of the war in quiet mourning. But here, in the mess hall, it's almost nice, almost, if you ignore the ever-present mildew creeping along the walls and the faint sound of someone sobbing in the latrine. Sleep, on the other hand, is a rumour. Your bunk, if you're lucky enough to get one, is a narrow slab of wood with a mattress so thin it could double as a suggestion. You're crammed shoulder to shoulder with other trainees, all of whom snore, mutter, or grind their teeth with astonishing volume. The lights never really go out, and the heaters swing wildly between freezing and inferno, as if the building itself is trying to simulate the ocean's contempt. You drift off each night to the sounds of coughing, cursing, and the occasional sleep paralysis scream. Morning comes far too soon. It always does. They also teach you how to drown, just in case you thought you might get out of this alive. You're forced to don bulky rubber escape suits and submerge yourself in water tanks, performing escape drills under supervision. You learn how to ascend slowly to avoid rupturing your lungs. You learn how to open pressure hatches against water resistance. You learn how many seconds you can go without air while trapped under an upside-down metal table. None of this knowledge is comforting. It just makes your eventual demise feel more procedural. Occasionally they bring in morale officers, men with crisp uniforms and eerily white teeth, who talk about glory, honour and the fatherland. They tell you how proud your families must be, how essential your role is in the war effort, how history will remember you. Then they leave, presumably to go have lunch somewhere above sea level. You remain behind, knee-deep in cold water, holding a rusted wrench, wondering when the feeling in your fingers will return. By the time training ends, you're not stronger, you're not braver, you're just dulled, sanded down into something that follows orders and keeps moving. You've lost weight, you've stopped asking questions, you've started sleeping with your boots on, just in case. The instructors say you're ready. You don't feel ready, but the train is waiting, and the sea is waiting, and the U-boat, your U-boat, is waiting too. What comes next isn't survival, it's duration, a countdown, a slow descent into a part of the world no human body was ever meant to occupy. You step onto the platform with your bag, your gear, and the quiet understanding that whatever version of you boarded this train won't be coming back. It's not a ship. It's not even a boat, really. It's a long metal tube with engines, wires, and a staggering sense of denial. Your instructors might have called it a marvel of engineering, but standing beside it on the dock, soaked in salt air, diesel fumes, and the steady drizzle of North Atlantic weather, it looks more like a misplaced grave. This is your U-boat. This is your new home. There's no brass band waiting, no officers saluting, no proud handshakes, just a steel cylinder that smells like regret and sinks on purpose. The first step aboard is physical. You have to climb down the conning tower ladder, narrow rungs, slippery with condensation, barely wide enough for your boots. You hit the deck with a wet clank and immediately crouch to avoid smashing your skull on a pipe. It won't be the last time. The air inside hits you like a damp sponge to the face. It's hot, wet, and stale all at once. A heady mixture of sweat, machine grease, mildew, unwashed bodies, and something that might have once been meat but now smells like melted rubber. You'd give it a name if you weren't trying not to gag. The lighting is low, not for dramatic effect, but because brighter bulbs produce more heat and burn out faster. The overheads flicker faintly, casting everything in a yellow-brown tint that makes skin look sallow and eyes look sunken. You shuffle forward, already hunched, already aware that posture will soon be a distant memory. You follow a petty officer through a corridor that's really more of a pipe with handholds, ducking wires, stepping over bulkheads, and trying not to fall into anyone's dinner. The first crew members you meet don't speak. They just look up, glance at your boots, and go back to their tasks, adjusting dials, stirring pots, or just sitting, staring at the wall like it owes them something. Their faces are drawn, their hair clings to their scalps, and their eyes carry that special glassiness found only in people who've long since accepted that dying might actually be the easier option. A few nod politely. One coughs something wet into his sleeve. None of them smile. This is not a place where smiles happen. Eventually, you're shown to your bunk. And by your bunk, they mean a shared rectangle of fabric and rusted steel tucked between two torpedo racks. It's barely wide enough to turn over in, and just long enough to fit your legs if you keep them perfectly straight. The mattress is thin and lumpy, the blanket damp, and the pillow smells like someone else's scalp. You're told not to unpack. There's nowhere to put anything. Your gear will stay in your duffel, under the bunk, behind someone else's boots. Don't touch the boots. They bite back. Every inch of the submarine is covered in something. A lever, a gauge, a bundle of wires, a pipe wrapped in oily tape, a hook that might once have held a lantern. There are no decorations, no nameplates, no photos, just machinery and metal and the occasional handwritten warning in fading pencil. Don't trust this valve. Watch your head. Pray harder. The galley is a joke. A narrow alcove with a single stove, a stack of battered pans, and a cupboard that rattles ominously every time someone opens the hatch. You will learn to love it. It's one of the only places warm enough to feel your fingers. The tour ends as abruptly as it started. No one asks if you have questions. No one expects you to. You're handed a duty roster and told to make yourself useful. That's the only real rule here. Be useful. If you're not, you're ballast. The crew doesn't need to like you. They need to rely on you. If the pressure hull cracks or the bilge floods, or someone drops a wrench onto the wrong circuit, you'd better be the one who fixes it. Or at least the one who doesn't get in the way. You begin to understand the scale of what's been done to you. This isn't like the mock-up submarines they trained you on. Those were clean, dry, and filled with safety equipment that actually worked. This boat is alive in the worst way, groaning, dripping, swaying with every movement of the sea. Nothing is still. Nothing is quiet. And everything is slightly too close. There's no privacy, no solitude, no corner where you can sit without brushing up against metal, fabric, or another man's knee. Every surface has been touched too many times. Every smell has permeated everything. You lie back on your bunk, briefly, just to rest your spine, and stare at the ceiling a foot from your nose. There's a bolt up there, rusted, loose. You wonder how long it's been like that. You wonder what happens if it falls. You wonder how long it'll take for the air in here to feel normal, or if it ever will. Somewhere, someone starts singing, quietly, off-key. The song doesn't sound hopeful. It sounds like something you hum while waiting for something worse. And that's when it truly sinks in. You live here now. You eat here, sleep here, sweat here, piss here. You might die here. You might vanish without a trace. The ocean closing over your story, without a ripple. You are no longer a person who lives on the land. You are part of the U-boat now. A small damp cog in a machine that drags itself through the dark, praying not to be noticed. There is no glory here, just survival, measured in shifts, in mould, in the slow erosion of everything that made you human. Welcome aboard. Sleep on a U-boat is not something you do. It's something you schedule, something you negotiate, something you steal in slivers, sandwiched between engine rumbles, alarm bells, and the bodily functions of 50 other men, stacked like ill-fitting cutlery. Your bunk, if you can even call it that, is not yours. It is part of a cycle, shared by 2 other crewmen who rotate through it in shifts. The system is called hot bunking, a term that sounds almost friendly until you remember it means the mattress is, literally, still warm when you crawl into it. Warm with someone else's sweat, someone else's breath, someone else's unwashed dreams. The space itself is barely wider than your shoulders, and just long enough to fit your frame if you keep your knees perfectly straight, and don't mind your feet brushing a bulkhead. The mattress is thin, sagging in the middle like it's lost the will to support anything. The blanket, singular, is perpetually damp, not from any specific leak, just from the constant presence of breath, condensation, and ambient dread. Your pillow smells faintly of mildew and strongly of someone else's scalp. The fabric is gritty from dried salt and, inexplicably, breadcrumbs. You learn not to ask why. You learn not to think about what's been wiped on the underside. Sleep happens in 6-hour blocks, unless something interrupts, which something always does. Sometimes it's a shift change. Sometimes it's a drill. Sometimes it's an actual emergency, which feels just like a drill but with slightly more screaming. You're expected to fall asleep instantly and wake up faster. There's no time to get comfortable, and even if there were, the constant sway of the boat and the ceaseless mechanical noise make it feel like you're sleeping inside a washing machine someone forgot to turn off. When you do manage to drift off, it's a light, fragile sort of unconsciousness, easily shattered by footsteps, whispered curses, or the wet slap of someone's bare feet stumbling to the latrine. And the sounds. Oh, the sounds. Snoring, of course, a symphony of it, from soft nasal huffing to full-throttle throat honks that rattle the bunk frames. Farting is constant, as digestive systems rebel against the canned horrors served in the galley. People grind their teeth, talk in their sleep, twitch, groan, and occasionally shout. One crewman thrashes violently every night and claims he's being chased through forests. Another mutters numbers and apologies until someone tells him to shut up. You use earplugs if you can find them, or wads of cloth if you can't. They help, but only just. Smell is its own form of sleep sabotage. The air inside the sub never really moves. It thickens. Every hour you spend aboard adds a new layer to the atmospheric soup. Diesel fumes, stale sweat, mould, unwashed hair, foot rot, wet wool, canned beans, and the chemical tang of grease and cleaning fluid that never quite cleans anything. When you lie down, the smell surrounds you, seeps into your skin, fills your nostrils. It clings to the bedding. It clings to you. Eventually you stop noticing, not because it goes away, but because your brain gives up. You develop rituals. Everyone does. You fold your clothes in a certain order, keep your boots tucked just so, stuff your few possessions, into cracks in the wall to create the illusion of a private space. You learn to sleep with one arm folded under your body to keep it from sliding into someone else's territory. You cover your face with your cap to block the flickering lights. You count heartbeats, or breaths, or the clicks of pressure gauges trying to lull yourself into forgetting where you are. Occasionally, it works. Usually, it doesn't. When it's your turn to wake, there's no alarm clock, just a hand on your boot and a whispered name. You roll out stiff and groggy, already sweating, already irritated. Your replacement slides in as you stand up, still buttoning his trousers, and pulls the blanket over his face without a word. You try not to think about how much of his skin is touching surfaces that were just touching yours. There's no room for modesty, no room for shame, only rotation. The officers have their own bunks, of course, smaller rooms with slightly thicker mattresses and partitions that provide a facsimile of privacy. They don't sleep much either, but when they do, it's uninterrupted, unless things go very wrong. You envy them, but not too much. No amount of insulation can block out the truth that the hull is only a few centimetres thick, and beyond that, there's pressure, and silence, and death. Some nights you don't even get your full shift. Maybe the engines stutter. Maybe someone hears a sonar ping. Maybe a depth charge hits too close, and everyone's roused for damage control. You leap from your bunk half-conscious, heart hammering, ribs sore from the last time you collided with a bulkhead in the dark. You don't ask questions. You just move. You can sleep later if later exists. Over time, sleep becomes abstract. You stop measuring it in hours and start measuring it in whether you dreamed. You rarely do. When you do, they're never good. You wake up feeling worse. You forget how it feels to lie down without bracing for impact. You forget how it feels to stretch fully, to roll over, to rest. You forget that sleep used to be peaceful. There is one toilet, one, for 50 men. It is not spacious, it is not private, it is not, in the strictest sense, functional. It is a small metal throne tucked inside a narrow closet, barely large enough to close the door, assuming you're desperate enough to want to. Most of the time, you don't bother. Not because you enjoy an audience, but because the door doesn't lock properly, and the sound of the latch clicking shut somehow guarantees someone will start banging on it within seconds. There's no dignity in here, only urgency, smell, and the shared understanding that shame left the boat the moment it left port. The toilet itself, officially called the head, is a mechanical contraption so convoluted it requires its own training. You can't just sit and flush, that would be too easy. Instead, you follow a multi-step procedure involving several valves, pressure releases, and timing mechanisms that must be operated in exactly the right order. If you get it wrong, and you will, one of two things happens. Either the system backs up and refuses to flush, or it flushes prematurely and shoots wastewater into places wastewater should never be. In both cases, someone ends up swearing, mopping, and questioning the trajectory of their life. The head vents directly into the sea, which sounds practical until you consider the logistics. If you're submerged too deep, the pressure outside is greater than the pressure inside. Open the wrong valve and seawater rushes in with impressive enthusiasm. If you're at the surface, the waste may vent correctly, or it may linger in the tank for just long enough to ferment into something truly biblical. Sometimes, the system half flushes, leaving behind a slurry that clings to the bowl like it has unfinished business. If you're lucky, you smell it. If you're not, you hear it slosh behind the panelling at night. Paper is rationed, of course. It always is. You get a few squares a day if the supply hasn't moulded. Most of it feels like it was cut from packing material. Some of it crumbles in your hand. In emergency, and everything becomes an emergency eventually, sailors resort to wiping with newspaper, rags, socks, or the least offensive corner of their undershirt. This is not advised, but often necessary. You'll know someone did it when their laundry starts walking on its own. Hygiene is theoretical. There's no sink in the toilet stall. There's barely room to breathe. You're expected to wash your hands in the communal basin near the galley, which means every meal is flavoured with the faint trace of someone else's bowel movements. The soap, when it exists, is the colour of boiled fat and smells like engine grease. You use it anyway, if only for the illusion that something is being cleaned. You quickly learn the timing of the head. Mornings are chaos, a line of twitching men waiting their turn, each one calculating whether they can hold it another 10 minutes or if they need to find a bucket and a quiet corner. Late nights are calmer, but also riskier. That's when the plumbing decides to fail. You enter expecting relief and emerge soaked in shame, holding a wrench and muttering about valve seals. Everyone has a story about the time the toilet betrayed them. Everyone. And when it breaks entirely, which it inevitably will, the backup plan appears. The sanitary bucket. A metal pail with a lid, stored beneath a bench and surrounded by silent prayer. It is not meant for regular use, but there are no regular days on a U-boat. When deployed, the bucket becomes a sacred object of hatred. You carry it to a semi-secluded spot, squat awkwardly, and do what must be done while staring at a wall and pretending you're somewhere else. If you're lucky, someone holds a towel up for cover. If you're unlucky, someone makes eye contact. Neither of you ever recovers. Disposal of the bucket's contents is a group activity. It's carried very, very carefully to the waste hatch, opened only when the boat surfaces. Sometimes the bucket is spilled in transit. Sometimes the lid doesn't hold. There are smells that follow you for life. Some get into your clothes. Others get into your dreams. You stop gagging after the first week. Not because it gets better, but because your brain gives up. There is also the matter of noise. The head is not soundproof, not even slightly. Every groan, splash, grunt or fart echoes down the corridor. Privacy, such as it is, consists of pretending you didn't hear anything. No one speaks of it, no one jokes. It's the unspoken agreement of the doomed. Everyone pretends, no one poops. It's cleaner that way, spiritually, if not physically. By week 2, the head has become a cursed shrine. Everyone uses it. Everyone hates it. Maintenance is constant, unpleasant, and often involves pulling off panels coated with decades of filth just to tighten a bolt that will come loose again in 3 days. There is no glory in cleaning the head. But if you don't, it overflows, and then glory becomes irrelevant because you're ankle deep in someone else's digestive emergency. Eventually, you learn to time your bodily functions around the head's mood swings. You eat less, you drink less, you become vaguely dehydrated at all times just to avoid the need. You lie in your bunk with a full bladder and tell yourself you can hold it another hour. 2 maybe. Until the crowd dies down. Until the smell becomes too much to ignore. And that's the worst part. Not the filth, not the noise, not even the proximity. It's that you eventually adapt. You begin to accept this cramped, damp, reeking box as just another part of the boat, another mechanical system to work around. You stop noticing how disgusting it is. You stop reacting. You become part of it. Just another function of waste management. The toilet doesn't break your spirit, it just absorbs it. Food aboard a U-boat is less about nutrition and more about inevitability. You have to eat, and so you do. Not because you're hungry, but because it's your turn, and the cook has scraped together something vaguely solid. The meals are not meals in any traditional sense. They are collisions of substance and temperature, loosely arranged into a form that might once have resembled food. No one complains, at least not loudly. Complaining wastes energy that might be needed for more important things, like chewing something that's technically still meat, or suppressing the reflex to gag when your coffee tastes like coal dust. At the start of the patrol, things aren't so bad. There's bread for one, dense, stale even then, but recognisably bread. There's canned meat, some of it even labelled, though the labels never quite match what's inside. You might open a tin that says pork and find something closer to compressed tendon in jelly. Occasionally, there are eggs, powdered of course, mixed with water into a yellow sludge that smells like yesterday's socks and tastes like nothing at all. For a few precious days, there might be fresh fruit, apples wrapped in newspaper, onions dangling in nets. These are treated like relics. A real onion can silence a room. But this fragile illusion of variety begins to collapse almost immediately. The storage conditions are abysmal. Too warm, too damp, too close to the diesel engines. Mould spreads fast like gossip. Bread goes green within the week. The onions rot from the inside out. Potatoes, once plentiful, begin to sprout grotesque white tendrils, like something trying to escape. Still, they are eaten. Bad potatoes are better than no potatoes. No one throws food away unless it physically moves on its own, and even then, it's up for debate. Canned goods last longer, but they carry their own dangers. Some of the tins are bulging slightly, which is not a good sign. The crew jokes about botulism in the same tone they use for depth charges. We're all going to get it eventually. Might as well laugh now. You don't taste test, you eat what you're given and hope your stomach remembers how to survive. The cook, if you can call him that, works miracles with what little he has. His galley is barely more than a hot plate and a shelf, tucked between machinery that radiates heat and resentment. He works shirtless, sweating into every meal, cursing softly as he wrestles dented cans and mystery grease into something vaguely spoonable. There is no mess hall, no tables, no trays. You eat wherever you can find a horizontal surface, crouched on a crate, perched on a pressure valve, or sitting cross-legged beneath a torpedo rack. Plates are rare. Bowls are communal. You use whatever's clean enough, or more accurately, whatever has dried from its last use. Cleanliness is aspirational. Dishes are rinsed with cold water, wiped with a rag that hasn't been properly washed in weeks, and handed to the next man in line. If you drop something, you have 3 seconds to decide if it's still edible. The answer is always yes. Coffee is a daily ritual, if only for morale. Technically, it's not coffee, it's ersatz, a chicory blend meant to approximate the taste of caffeine without the actual benefits. It's bitter, black, and occasionally laced with oil residue from the nearby engine room. Still, you drink it. Because warm liquid is comforting. Because it's something to hold. Because it's one of the last parts of life that still feels remotely civilized. Sugar is rare. Real milk is a fairy tale. Sometimes the brew has a faint, metallic aftertaste. No one investigates. Holidays pass without notice, except that someone might open a tin marked special issue. These are old rations, pulled from the back of the stockpile, intended to boost morale. Once the crew was given sauerkraut that contained a human tooth. It was never determined if it was from a previous factory worker or a very unfortunate rat. Either way, it was eaten. Everything is eaten, even the things that shouldn't be. Hunger makes philosophers of everyone. You begin to contemplate the ethical line between sustenance and punishment. When the food runs low, and it always does, the meals become smaller, saltier, harder to swallow. Hunger settles in slowly, like damp. You think about meals you didn't finish back home. You think about butter, fresh bread, cheese that doesn't glow. Some nights you dream about soup, not a real memory, just the idea of soup, steaming in a white bowl, a spoon that fits in your mouth, a napkin. Then you wake up and find someone snoring next to your foot and a cockroach on the ceiling. And yet, your body adjusts, not because the food improves, but because you lower your expectations. You stop tasting things. You just chew and swallow. You eat with mechanical focus, like fueling an engine that barely functions anymore. You lose weight slowly but consistently. Your belt notches down, your cheeks hollow out, Your skin takes on a sallow tint that never quite goes away. Your stomach shrinks. Your cravings simplify. One day someone finds a potato that's only half mould, and it's the highlight of the week. You will come to crave that potato. You will remember it fondly, not because it was good, not because it filled you, but because, for one shining moment, it reminded you what food was supposed to be. And then it was gone. There is no morning on a U-boat, no night either. No sunrise, no sunset, no birdsong or twilight. The only real marker of time is the shift bell, a flat, joyless clang that signals it's your turn to do something unpleasant again. You exist in a metal womb floating somewhere beneath the surface, sealed away from the sky, from clocks, from the idea that hours are supposed to mean anything. Your body loses track quickly. You sleep in a haze, wake up unsure whether you've been unconscious for minutes or months, and trudge off to fulfill tasks you no longer question. Time dissolves into routine, and routine dissolves into exhaustion. The daily schedule, if you can call it that, is broken into shifts. Watches, maintenance, sleep, repeat. You stand watch in the control room, eyes scanning dials and gauges, listening for sounds that might mean flooding, malfunction, or the presence of an enemy who'd very much like you to stop existing. Most of the time, it's quiet. That doesn't help. Silence on a submarine is rarely peaceful. It's just a holding pattern before something starts leaking or exploding. You try to stay alert, but your body rebels. Your eyelids droop. Your thoughts drift. You snap back when someone coughs, or when a valve hisses too loudly, and your heart briefly forgets its job. When you're not on watch, you're working. Maintenance never stops. Pipes corrode. Bolts shake loose. Gauges flicker. Air filters clog. You clean what can be cleaned and patch what can't. You twist yourself into impossible angles to scrub mildew off walls that no longer resist it. The engine room is its own unique hell, deafening, sweltering, and always on the verge of catastrophe. You leave it soaked in a mixture of your own sweat and someone else's oil. Hands raw from twisting wrenches against machines that hate you. Gloves are a luxury. So are instructions. You do what you're told, or you guess. If you're lucky, your repairs hold. If you're not, you get a visit from one of the officers. They don't shout. They don't have to. Their presence is enough. A quiet word, a sideways look, a shift in tone. It's all it takes to make you feel like a defective cog. You avoid them whenever possible, not because they're cruel, but because they're reminders of rank, of failure, of the way this boat grinds people down one layer at a time. Meals break up the monotony, but not in a good way. You eat because it's scheduled, not because you're hungry. Food is something to do with your hands. You chew slowly, eyes fixed on the nearest light fixture, pretending you don't hear the man next to you breathe through his mouth while slurping from a shared tin. Clean-up is perfunctory. A smear with a rag, a rinse from a canteen, then back to work, or back to your bunk, if the gods of the shift cycle are feeling generous. Sleep, when it comes, is not rest, it's pause. A brief retreat into something quieter, but never fully unconscious. You dream of alarms, you dream of flooding. You dream of being summoned to your post only to find it underwater. Most of the crew snores. A few talk in their sleep. One man wakes up screaming once a week like clockwork. No one says anything. The rest of you just wait for him to go quiet again and roll over. Hygiene exists in theory. There are no showers. Your best hope is a sponge bath with cold water from a metal basin that's been shared by half the crew already. Soap runs out quickly. Towels stay damp indefinitely. You wipe yourself down and hope you didn't just spread something fungal from one armpit to the other. Shaving happens infrequently and reluctantly. Haircuts are done with scissors someone definitely used on electrical wiring earlier that day. After a while, everyone begins to look the same. Greyish, puffy, tired, like ghosts who still sweat. You try to keep track of days. Some mark them in a notebook. Others carve tiny lines into the edge of their bunk. But the lines blur, Was that yesterday's watch or today's? Did you eat breakfast twice or not at all? The human body wasn't meant to live like this, below the surface, in the dark, with 50 others, none of whom are okay. Morale doesn't die suddenly. It erodes, flaking off piece by piece until it's just dust clinging to your uniform. You start to notice the smell, not because it's new, but because it changes. Fresh sweat becomes sour. Oil becomes metallic. Someone's breath takes on a fruity tang. A sign of ketosis, someone says. Or maybe just malnutrition. It doesn't matter. No one's going to the doctor. There is no doctor. There's just more routine, more waiting, more pretending the walls aren't closing in, even as the ceiling gets lower every time you wake up. And still the cycle continues. Wake, work, eat, work, sleep, repeat. You try to remember what day it is. You fail. You try to remember your last conversation. It was probably about pipes, or fuses, or food, or silence. Every day feels the same, because it is the same. You're not counting down to anything. Just through the hours, through the shifts, through the dull ache of being trapped somewhere you cannot leave, doing things you cannot avoid, with people you cannot escape. And somewhere in the background, the engines keep humming. Steady, relentless, and slightly out of tune. Like a lullaby you never wanted, the engines are not background noise. They are the background. They are the foreground. They are everything. You don't sleep near a diesel engine. You sleep with it, beneath it, around it, inside of it. Every surface in the aft half of the U-boat pulses with a mechanical vibration, like the entire structure is breathing in wheezing, soot-choked gasps. You learn the rhythms of it fast, the coughing ignition, the deep-throated growl, the rattling crescendo when the speed picks up. The noise isn't just sound, it's sensation. It moves through your bones, settles behind your eyes and hums in your molars long after the shift ends. You don't remember silence, not real silence, not the kind where your ears can rest. Here there's always a buzz, a churn, a clatter, even when the engines pause, and that's the part that terrifies you. Your ears keep ringing, as if afraid to admit something's wrong. When the engines stop, it's never good. Either they've malfunctioned, or the boat is diving to hide, which means someone up there wants you dead. You learn quickly to interpret every shift in sound like a heartbeat. Too fast and something's wrong. Too slow and something's wrong. Silence is the worst. Silence means waiting to hear if the next sound is water rushing in. During surface travel, the diesel engines roar with authority. They burn through fuel and oxygen, like the boat itself is trying to escape something. The heat they generate seeps into every crevice, making the rear compartments feel like a furnace, wrapped in metal and body odour. Air becomes thick and grimy, impossible to breathe without tasting the exhaust. The ventilation system does its best, but its best consists mostly of rearranging the smoke. Everyone smells like diesel, everyone breathes it. After a few days, your nose gives up, and your sinuses form a protective film of soot. You will not be clean again. When submerged, the diesels shut down, and the electric motors take over. Quieter, yes, but no less stressful. They emit a high-pitched whine that never stops, a mechanical tinnitus that drills into your skull. The boat hums like a trapped insect. Power is drawn from a massive bank of batteries that must be charged whenever possible, which means every moment on the surface is a risk, and every second submerged is a countdown. If the batteries die, the boat dies. No propulsion, no air purification, no light. Just a quiet drift into pressure and oblivion. The crew doesn't talk much about this. They don't need to. You're not an engineer, but that doesn't matter. You will spend time with the engines. Everyone does. Maintenance is constant. Oil leaks, belts loosen, screws vanish. There's always something that needs tightening, wiping, replacing, or realigning. The engine room is a symphony of urgency and burns. You crouch in awkward positions, with tools too big for the space, cursing under your breath as sweat runs into your eyes. The floor is slick with fluid that might be water, or might not be. You don't check anymore. You just keep working until it's time to swap out with someone else, or until you hear a sound you weren't trained to identify. Heat is the enemy. The engines run hot, the walls retain it, and the crew radiates it. Shirts are optional, not because it's comfortable, but because fabric holds moisture and turns into a paste that fuses with your skin. The noise combines with the heat until your thoughts feel slow cooked. You get dizzy sometimes. Everyone does. There's no breeze, no relief, just the endless churn of gears and fumes and vibrating metal. You start to dream of open windows, even though you haven't seen one in weeks. You miss wind, you miss cold. Sometimes a component fails, a gasket, a bearing, a filter. When it does, you find out immediately. The pitch changes, the engine stutters, the vibrations turn erratic. Panic sets in like an old friend. You know what comes next? Troubleshooting in the dark, stripping parts with numb fingers, working by flashlight, while an officer stands behind you, trying not to say anything, but saying everything with his silence. Everyone holds their breath, not because of fumes, although those don't help, but because a broken engine might mean a broken boat, and there's nowhere to pull over. The worst part is, the engines are temperamental. They have personalities. They groan differently depending on the humidity. They stall when someone speaks too confidently about good luck. They start coughing ominously after depth charges, as if insulted by the shockwaves. Some of the crew talk to them, muttering encouragement or threats, like you would with a stubborn mule or a possessed furnace. No one laughs at this. You do it too eventually. You stop realizing it. And yet, through all of it, the noise, the heat, the shaking floor plates, the long hours spent elbow deep in grime, you begin to rely on it. The hum becomes familiar. You notice when it changes. You panic when it's absent. The engines are awful, loud, oppressive things, but they are also the only thing keeping you alive. As long as they're screaming, so are you. It's a partnership born of desperation. You tolerate them. They tolerate you. Until one day, they stop. And the boat goes quiet in a way you didn't know it could. You don't get much warning. Maybe a sonar ping. Maybe a garbled message from the radio room. Maybe just the sudden silence that falls over the boat like a dropped curtain. You freeze. Everyone does. You're deep, far below the surface, where sunlight doesn't reach and sound travels forever. Up above, someone's looking for you, and they've brought gifts. Steel barrels packed with explosives, designed specifically to kill things like you. Steel tubes full of people, air and blind luck. The Allies know you're here. They just don't know exactly where. Not yet. The first depth charge drops. You feel it before you hear it. A low, slow thump, like someone knocking on the hull with a sledgehammer wrapped in wool. Then another, closer. Then 5 at once. The air vibrates. Your stomach contracts. Dust trickles from the pipes overhead. You count the seconds between each detonation, trying to measure the distance, trying to trick yourself into thinking that knowledge will somehow keep you safe. It won't. They're guessing, and they're getting closer. There is no drill for this, no preparation that matters. You sit at your station, hands trembling just slightly, trying to look useful, trying to remember how to breathe without making noise. Somewhere, someone is praying, audibly. Someone else is laughing, the quiet, wheezing kind that comes from the part of your brain that's already cracked. The lights flicker. The hull groans, long and low, like it's sick of all of you. And then comes the big one. When a charge detonates close, the sound is indescribable. It doesn't pass through your ears or the ice, it passes through your bones. The entire boat lurches sideways, like it's trying to escape, but can't. A wrench clatters to the floor. A pipe bursts. You hear a man grunt as he's thrown against a bulkhead. The walls scream. The deck shudders beneath your boots, like it's trying to shake you off. And through it all, there's this moment, just a second, where you realise you're completely, utterly powerless. This isn't a battlefield. There are no trenches, no flags, no strategy. This is extermination by blind calculation. They drop explosives into the ocean and wait. You either explode or you don't. You either rise to the surface in flames or you vanish into the deep. Another mystery for some future salvage team to puzzle over. You are not fighting, you are hiding. The boat shudders again, and you swear you hear the metal buckle, just a little. Someone vomits, someone else starts reciting names, family, friends, dead pets, like an incantation against pressure. And yet, the routine continues. Orders are still barked. Gauges still need watching. Ballast still needs adjusting. You are expected to function while the ocean tries to crush you and the sky tries to bomb you. Your job does not pause for existential terror. You seal the leak, you pass the wrench, you nod when spoken to, you wipe the sweat from your palms and keep moving. The alternative is sitting still long enough to hear your heartbeat go irregular. After a while, the charges stop, or they get farther away, or maybe your hearing's just given up. No one announces the all clear because there isn't one. You just wait quietly, staring at the pressure gauges, wondering if you're still leaking. The lights stabilize. The air feels heavier. Not physically, emotionally, like the room's holding its breath. You don't relax. No one does. You just reset. Back into place. Back into the routine. Nothing was hit directly. This time. You find yourself listening for new sounds. Groans in the walls. The drip of water where water should not be. The subtle change in how the floor feels under your boots. After a good pounding, everything is suspect. The whole boat feels like it's had a panic attack. The systems still work, but not quite right. A valve hisses more than it used to. The engine makes a noise like it's clearing its throat. You pretend not to notice. If you reported every weird sound after a depth charge run, you'd never stop writing reports. At some point, someone makes a joke. Always. Something crude, something obscene, something about the British and their aim. It's not funny, but people laugh anyway, because laughter means breath. Breath means you're still here. The cook serves whatever's left of the day's meal, lukewarm stew, or maybe just crackers and grease. You eat it slowly, methodically, not because you're hungry, but because you're still alive. And this is what alive people do. Later, when you finally lie in your bunk, you close your eyes and wait for the next round. You know it's coming. Maybe in an hour, maybe in a day, maybe never. Which is worse in a way, because you never stop listening. You fall asleep to the phantom echoes of explosions. You wake up mid-flinch. You dream of implosions, of rivets popping like bullets, of the sea rushing in, black and cold and final. You never hear the one that kills you, but you hear all the ones that don't. And that's the real punishment. You don't notice it at first. The air still feels like air. It moves in and out of your lungs the same way it always has. But then it starts to get heavier. Not thicker exactly, just wrong. Like something's riding along with it. Something used, something sour. You rub your forehead and chalk it up to exhaustion, or the noise, or maybe hunger. It's none of those. It's carbon dioxide, and it's building. Submarines aren't built for luxury, but they are built to keep you alive. Barely. The air is recirculated through filters, scrubbed, dried, and pushed back into circulation through systems that were already outdated before they were installed. Oxygen canisters help. Chemical scrubbers do their best, but they don't last forever, and they don't work perfectly. When the engines are off, and the boat is submerged, the system starts losing the battle. Slowly, steadily, the air becomes a soup of breath already breathed. At first you get a headache. That's normal. Everyone has one. The pressure, the stress, the humidity, you expect a little pain. Then your head starts to feel like it's been stuffed with wool. You can't think clearly. Sentences drift away mid-thought. You forget names, numbers, instructions you've heard 100 times. You stand in a room for 5 minutes before remembering why you went in. The others do the same. Everyone's just slightly slower. Not drunk, not stupid, just starved for something invisible. Then comes the heat, not real heat, just the sensation of it. A flush behind the eyes, a warmth in your spine that doesn't make you sweat, but makes your skin itch. You try to focus, you can't. You try to sleep, you can't. You lie still, willing yourself not to breathe too deeply, because every lungful feels less satisfying than the last. You light a match to check the oxygen levels. A trick someone taught you during training. It flickers once and dies. That's when you realise how bad it's gotten. The officers say nothing. They don't need to. Everyone knows. The air is turning. You hear the rebreathers kick in, a mechanical hum that's supposed to sound reassuring, but only reminds you that you're trapped in a vessel where air is a finite resource. You picture yourself as part of the system. One of 50 mouths converting good air into poison, gradually suffocating each other through nothing more than biology. You are your own gas chamber, politely queuing for the privilege of being the last one to notice. Then the symptoms start to vary. Some men become agitated, twitchy, quick to snap at small annoyances. Others get quiet, glassy-eyed, staring into the middle distance like they're watching something no one else can see. One man laughs, not a sharp bark, but a low, continuous giggle that doesn't stop until someone slaps him hard enough to snap him out of it. Another one starts whispering to the wall above his bunk, tracing the lines of rust with his fingers like they're sacred texts. No one intervenes. What would you say? The smell doesn't help. As oxygen depletes and CO2 rises, the odours intensify. Sweat becomes sharper, more acidic. The sourness of unbrushed teeth, the damp wool of blankets, the ever-present scent of oil and mould. All of it seems to thicken, crawl up your nose and settle behind your eyes. You try to ignore it. You try to meditate, to count, to slow your breathing, but the panic rises all the same. It lives at the base of your skull, just below reason, humming quietly like the battery system when it's running low. You get nosebleeds, random ones, not gushing, just enough to worry you. Your gums swell. Your tongue feels dry no matter how much water you drink. Someone faints during watch. They say he's fine, just dehydrated, but everyone knows what really happened. You're running out of time, out of air, out of chances. The filters are overdue for maintenance. The chemical scrubbers are running hot. And the sea above is filled with people who want you dead, so surfacing is not an option. Not yet. Eventually, someone opens a valve. Fresh air from a hidden reserve. A hiss of hope. You can feel it as soon as it hits your lungs, like tasting water after a long, dry fast. No one speaks, but everyone breathes deeper. You don't realise how bad it was until your thoughts start lining up again. The headache fades, the heat dissipates, the crew regains a little colour. Someone tells a joke and it almost lands. You start to believe, if only for a moment, that maybe you'll make it through the day. But you know better now. The air isn't free, it's borrowed. Every breath you take is a transaction with the boat. A favour you'll have to repay later. You've seen what happens when the systems fail, when the backup reserves run dry, when the carbon builds and builds until you forget who you were. You know now what it means to suffocate slowly, surrounded by other people doing the same. Oxygen is no longer something you take for granted. It's a resource, a ration, a blessing dispensed in mechanical wheezes and carefully monitored valves. You pray to machinery now. You pray to filters and fans and seals that don't leak. You've learned to fear the air, because once it's gone, nothing else matters. There's no doctor on board. That's the first thing you learn when someone gets sick. There's no white coat, no stethoscope, no quiet professional with a clipboard and a plan. There's just a metal cabinet bolted to the wall, filled with gauze, aspirin, iodine, and the haunting confidence of men who've read half of a first aid manual once. Officially, there's a medic, a crewman with a few weeks of training, and a red cross patch sewn onto his uniform. Unofficially, he's just another guy trying not to faint while stitching someone's leg shut with a needle that hasn't been boiled in 3 days. The injuries start early. You bang your head on a pipe, you jam your finger in a hatch, you slip on a film of oil near the engine room and take a valve to the ribs. The boat moves constantly, jolting unpredictably with every wave or adjustment. Bruises are expected. Sores develop from friction and sweat. Blisters form on your hands from turning the same bolts over and over, always just a little too tight. You ignore them until they burst. You keep working anyway, and then come the infections. Nothing heals properly in this place. The humidity keeps wounds moist in the worst possible way. Bandages cling to your skin like punishment. You clean the cuts when you can, but the water's never really clean, and the rags always smell faintly of mildew. The infection starts slow. A red halo around a scrape on your knuckle, maybe a little swelling. Then it grows warm, then it starts to throb. You show the medic. He shrugs and wraps it tighter. He tells you to rest. You both know that's not going to happen. Illness spreads faster than rumours. One man coughs in his bunk. The next day, half the crew is sniffling. By the end of the week, it's a full-blown epidemic of sore throats, blocked sinuses, and fevers. There is no quarantine. There is no space to isolate. You all breathe the same air, touch the same rails, share the same utensils. When the boat is submerged, there's no fresh air at all. Your breath gets recycled along with everyone else's germs. Someone always has a cold. Sometimes it turns into pneumonia. You hope it doesn't. Hope is really all you've got. Dental pain is a special kind of torture. You think you can ignore it. A little ache in your molar, maybe sensitivity to the cold canned meat. Then one day, you bite down, and the world goes white with pain. There are no dentists, no drills, just pliers. If it gets bad enough, someone holds you down, while the medic yanks it out with a grunt and a prayer. There's no anaesthetic, only moonshine if you're lucky, or a rag between your teeth if you're not. Afterward, you lie in your bunk for a day with a swollen face and a socket full of gauze, wondering how you're still alive. Skin conditions are rampant. Rashes bloom beneath your arms, around your groin, behind your knees, anywhere that stays damp, which is everywhere. You wash when you can, but the water is cold and soap is limited. You trade for it, you hoard it, you dream of it. Fungus thrives in your boots, your feet peel in layers, toenails turn yellow. One man has a growth between his toes that makes people flinch just looking at it. He pretends not to notice, no one says anything. Worse than the visible ailments are the invisible ones. The fatigue that never lifts, the numbness in your fingers, the trembling in your hands. You tell yourself, it's just exhaustion, just nerves. But you've seen it before, in other men. The stare that lasts too long, the twitch in the corner of the eye, the way someone stops eating, then stops speaking, then stops moving altogether. You check for a fever. You ask them if they're okay. They say yes, they're lying. But you don't push. There's nothing you can do anyway. Every once in a while, something serious happens. A broken limb, a head injury, a seizure. Then it's all hands on deck. Someone runs for the medical box. Someone else finds a board to use as a splint. The officers bark orders while everyone else pretends they know what to do. If the injury is bad enough, the captain considers surfacing. But surfacing is dangerous, so the injured man lies there, moaning softly, hoping the boat survives long enough for him to get back to shore. Some do, some don't. And then there's gangrene. You hear about it. You hope never to see it. But eventually, you do. A blackened toe, a foul smell, a man refusing to remove his sock because he knows what's underneath. The medic doesn't have what he needs. No antibiotics, no surgical tools, just gauze, iodine, and fear. Sometimes the limb can be saved, sometimes it can't. And when it can't, well, there's a saw somewhere in the engine room, covered in rust, just in case. The official protocol for most ailments is simple: rest. But rest doesn't exist here. There's no recovery. You work through the fever. You limp on the swollen ankle. You pretend the ringing in your ears is just the engine. There are no sick days in a steel tube hundreds of meters beneath the sea. There's just grit, guesswork, and the shared understanding that if something truly goes wrong, really, terribly wrong, there's no help coming. Just the slow shuffle of a crew pretending they're not terrified. And the dull, aching hope that you'll make it to land before something inside you gives out. There are moments, rare and strangely quiet, when the monotony breaks. When something appears on the sonar that isn't just a rock or the vague suggestion of a whale. When the lookout spots a plume of smoke on the horizon. When someone in the control room mutters a phrase that makes everyone's spine stiffen. Contact. And suddenly the entire boat wakes up. Not joyfully, not even nervously, just alert. You have a job to do, and for once it doesn't involve scraping mildew off a pipe or sharing a bucket with 4 other men. You are here, technically, to kill something, and now it might actually happen. The process begins slowly. There's no dramatic scramble to action stations, no shouting, just clipped orders, passed down like stage directions. The U-boat is a predator, but a cautious one, fragile, blind in places, and always one mistake away from being hunted itself. You adjust course, reduce speed, slip beneath the waves to a depth that balances stealth and visibility. The air changes, the mood shifts, even the cook falls silent. Men hover near the torpedo controls, eyes on dials, fingers twitching. The engine noise dims to a hum. Every sound matters now. The creak of a hull, the knock of a boot, the nervous shuffling of someone who knows they'll be sleeping next to a torpedo that may or may not fire properly. You stalk the target like an animal in a trap, slow, deliberate, breath held. Through the periscope, the officer calls out bearings, speed, range. Sometimes it's a freighter, sometimes it's a convoy, sometimes it's something less clear, less distinct, moving slowly across the horizon like a ghost. Identification is rarely certain. There's no time for morality or questions. It's a ship. It's on the other side. That's enough. You load the tubes and wait. Sweat rolls down your spine as you wonder. Not whether you'll hit it, but what you'll feel if you do. The order comes in a whisper. Fire. A thud echoes through the hull as compressed air launches the torpedo forward. You don't see the result right away. You listen. You wait. You count. The seconds stretch. Maybe it's a dud. Maybe it missed. Maybe someone saw the trail and turned just in time. Then someone says something low. Something like hit. The crew tenses. You rush to the periscope. There's smoke. Maybe a fire. Maybe not. You squint, waiting for the sea to confirm your guess. Then you see the plume, unmistakable, rising from the stern of the target. A cheer erupts. Brief. Flat. Not celebration, just release. Sometimes the ship sinks right away. Sometimes it lists for hours. Sometimes it burns until the fire disappears below the waterline and the ocean finishes what you started. You don't see people. Not often. You know they're there. You know crews don't sail ghost ships. You know logically that what you just hit was carrying sailors, probably merchant mariners, possibly armed, possibly not. You try not to think about it. The others don't speak. There's no gloating, no victory speech, just a low rumble of the engines spinning back up and the quiet return to routine. But that silence follows you. It lingers longer than the cheers. You start to imagine faces, not specific ones, just a suggestion of them. A man eating breakfast in a galley before the torpedo hit. A cook below deck who never saw it coming. A radio operator who only got out one last half-finished message before the lights went out. You tell yourself they were enemy combatants. You tell yourself they would have done the same. But the nausea doesn't care about logic. The bile doesn't ask for justification. Sometimes you miss. The torpedo glides silently past the target, or malfunctions, or detonates prematurely. When that happens, the crew tenses for the inevitable. Retaliation, depth charges, aircraft, screams in the dark. You dive deep, holding your breath like a child hiding under a blanket. You're not always punished, but you're never sure you won't be. Every attack is a gamble. Every success a prelude to potential annihilation. There are days, long, grueling days, when you see nothing. When the ocean stretches in every direction and the sonar returns nothing but static and disappointment. These are worse in a way. The boredom feeds paranoia. The crew starts whispering about phantom ships, allied traps, or cursed waters. Some claim to have seen a periscope at midnight. Others say they heard a ship that wasn't there. You laugh it off, but not entirely. You want action, even if it means danger. Anything to break the cycle of waiting to die. You don't talk about it much afterward. The hits, the misses, the dead. You return to your bunk, to your duties, to the strange comfort of routine. But it stays with you. In the silence between shifts. In the flicker of flame behind your eyelids. In the moment before sleep, when you wonder who was on that boat, and whether someone else, far away, is wondering who was on yours. Because in the end, the objective isn't glory, it isn't revenge, it isn't even victory. It's just something, anything, proof that this floating prison isn't pointless, that the misery, the fear, the long descent into mechanical claustrophobia has meaning, that you're not just surviving, you're doing something. Even if that something is making another group of men drown more slowly than you will. There is no privacy. That's not an exaggeration. It's just math. 50 men in a metal tube the size of a train car. No doors, no curtains, no corners. Every inch of the U-boat is spoken for, and none of it is yours. You dress with your back to the wall, hoping no one looks. You relieve yourself beside someone eating dinner. You sleep a foot away from a man having a nightmare, both of you pretending not to notice each other. There is no alone time. There is no mental reset. You live in a crowd and, slowly, that crowd begins to crack. It doesn't happen all at once. It starts with small things. A misplaced word, a sentence that trails off, a man staring too long at a blank wall. The youngest sailor mutters in his sleep. The same phrase, over and over, in a voice just loud enough to be unsettling. He cries sometimes too, but only after lights out. Only when he thinks the others are asleep. No one says anything. No one comforts him. Emotional honesty feels radioactive down here. You ignore it, for now. The cook starts talking to the sausages. Not every day, just occasionally. When he thinks no one's listening. You pass him in the galley and hear a low murmur. Something about patience or sacrifice, or maybe revenge. You pretend not to hear. He still cooks, still stirs the pot, but you don't meet his eyes when he hands you your bowl. Something in them has gone opaque. One of the electricians has developed a twitch in his left eye. It pulses at regular intervals like a second heartbeat. He says he's fine, and maybe he is, but he also spends most of his free time methodically cleaning the same wrench with a piece of cloth that hasn't been dry in weeks. He sleeps less now. Or more. It's hard to tell. His bunkmate says he talks in numbers, full sentences, but only using digits. You pretend that's a joke because if it's not, it's worse. Even the officers aren't immune. The commander, normally a man of terse words and clockwork habits, hasn't blinked in hours. You notice it during a watch rotation. His eyes are glassy, fixed on the sonar readout, unmoving. Someone coughs and he doesn't react. You wonder if he's thinking about a previous patrol, about the men who didn't come back, about the math. You wonder if he's doing it right now. Jokes still happen. They just aren't funny anymore. Someone makes a crack about torpedoes having better aim than half the crew. Laughter follows, but it's thin, nervous, and over in an instant. Another man draws a cartoon on the wall in pencil, a stick figure waving from inside a toilet bowl. It's erased within the hour. Humour down here curdles quickly. What's funny on day 2 becomes unnerving by week 3. Most jokes now involve drowning, madness, or what someone's body will look like when they finally snap. Conversations dry up. At first there were stories, childhood homes, girls back in port, dreams about the future. Now there's silence, or worse, half sentences that trail into nothing. You ask someone a question, and they nod without responding. You tell a story, and halfway through, you realise you've forgotten the ending, so you stop telling it. So does everyone else. The only topic that gets attention now is food, and even that is mostly complaints or dreams about potatoes that aren't green. Noise starts to affect people differently. Some flinch at every bang, every hiss of steam, every creak of pressure in the hull. Others stop reacting altogether. A wrench clatters to the floor, and one man nearly jumps out of his boots, while the guy next to him doesn't even look up. You find yourself falling into the second category. The sudden noises don't startle you anymore. The boat groans like it's about to split open, and you just blink. There's nothing you can do anyway. Sleep becomes unpredictable. Some men can't get enough. They collapse at every opportunity, curling into corners like animals. Others lie awake for hours staring at the ceiling, eyes wide, lips moving silently. You wake up unsure if you dreamed or if the hallucinations have simply followed you out of your bunk. The boundary between rest and waking blurs. So does the boundary between sanity and what comes after. There's a smell you can't place. It's not the usual stew of diesel, mould and unwashed skin. It's something subtler. The smell of people unravelling, of breath that's gone stale, of fear held in too long. The air down here carries emotion like humidity. You breathe it in with every sigh, every curse, every word that doesn't get spoken. You start to feel heavier, not from fatigue, but from atmosphere. You don't talk about it, and no one does. Because if you acknowledge it, it's real. If you say he's losing it, then you have to ask who's next. You have to wonder how far down the list your name is. So you keep your mouth shut. You keep your head down. You do your job. And when someone starts muttering nonsense, you just nod politely and walk away. You pray that your own cracks don't show. You pray that when your turn comes, it'll be quiet. And when the boat finally surfaces, when you climb out and blink into sunlight that feels too bright for the world you just left, you don't feel relief. You feel exposed, like something inside you didn't come back up with the rest of the crew. Something stayed down there, still whispering, surfacing sounds like it should be a relief. After days beneath the surface, breathing recycled air, sweating in stale heat, sleeping inside what feels like a sealed metal coffin, the idea of rising into the open sea feels almost hopeful. But nothing about surfacing is hopeful. It's a gamble. A dangerous, calculated roll of the dice that asks, do you want oxygen badly enough to be seen? Do you want fresh air enough to risk becoming a silhouette on someone's radar? Because up there, in the cold light of moon or morning, everything with a gun is waiting to spot you. When the order comes to surface, the mood shifts instantly. The atmosphere inside the boat tightens, men tense. You feel it in the way boots move faster across the deck, in the sharper tone of the officer's voice, in the way no one meets each other's eyes. You're trained for this. Everyone is. The sequence of commands, the mechanical ballet of valves and ballast, the precise ascent that brings you from pressure and shadow back to the brittle edge of the world. It's all rehearsed, but no amount of preparation can soften the simple truth. You're safer down there in the dark. At least below, the sea hides you, and yet you rise. The hull groans as it adjusts. Water sluices off the exterior with a hiss like steam, and you climb the narrow ladder into the conning tower, throat already tight. When the hatch opens, the air rushes in like judgment, cold, briny, and somehow sterile compared to the damp stew you've been inhaling for days. It stings your nose and lungs. For a second, it's glorious, and then you look around. The world has changed while you were submerged. The sky is unfamiliar. The stars are too sharp, too distant. The horizon is wide but empty, like a stage after the actors have gone home. The sea stretches in every direction, black and unreadable, broken only by the wake trailing behind you, and the constant fear that you're not as alone as you think. You scan for lights, shadows, movement, anything that might signal a destroyer, a plane, a mine. You find nothing. That doesn't make you feel better. Fresh air is a gift, but it's not free. The longer you're on the surface, the higher the risk. Radar can spot you. Spotter planes can silhouette your tower against the sky and call in an attack. Even the moon feels like a traitor some nights, shining just brightly enough to draw attention to your shape against the waves. You keep the hatch open just long enough to air out the boat, recharge the batteries, and give the crew a few precious minutes of breathing room. Then you close it again and dive back into the relative safety of suffocating darkness. While you're up there, you work fast, refill the oxygen tanks, pump out bilge water, run the diesels to keep the batteries from dying. It's loud, but it has to be done. Every second on the surface counts. Some men linger at the conning tower, not because they're needed, but because they can't bear the thought of going back down just yet. They savour the cold, the space, even the silence. Not real silence, of course, but the kind that comes without bulkheads vibrating in your ears. You volunteer for top watch sometimes. Not because you enjoy it, but because you get to see the stars. They don't mean anything down here. No romance, no navigation, no wonder. But they remind you that the world still exists above the waterline. That something is still turning, even if you're no longer sure you're part of it. You scan the sky, the sea, the line between them, half hoping to see something that would justify the anxiety. A plane, a light, anything. But mostly it's just dark, empty. Occasionally, you surface near the wreckage of a ship you torpedoed days earlier. You don't talk about that. You don't mention the oil slick, or the burnt wood, or the single black shoe floating upside down. You just breathe deeply and look away, pretending not to hear the splash of something heavy rolling with the current. Even on a clear night, you feel disconnected. The air tastes too clean. The space feels too large. It's like stepping into a memory of something you used to know. Fresh wind, open sky, the sound of waves lapping against steel. But you don't belong here anymore. Not really. You've lived too long in metal. Your body's too used to recycled air and narrow corridors. The ocean above feels alien. So you go back down willingly. You tell yourself it's safer. You tell yourself it's home. The hatch seals behind you with a hollow thud, and the stale air greets you like an old friend. The lights flicker. The pressure stabilizes. The noise returns. You're back where you belong, or at least where you've resigned yourself to be. No one speaks as the boat descends again. There's nothing to say. You surfaced, you survived, for now. And if you're lucky, no one saw you. Every patrol might be your last. That truth has been with you since your first time down the ladder, since your first deep dive, since the first time a depth charge went off close enough to make your ribs ache. You've always known it. You've just done your best not to think about it. But eventually, it catches up. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way. Not with an orchestra or a slow-motion explosion. Just something fails. Something slips. One piece too many goes wrong at once. And suddenly, it's your turn. Sometimes it's mechanical. A crack in a weld that grows with each dive. A pressure gauge that reads normal right up until the hull folds in. An engine that sputters and dies, leaving you adrift in still black water. Sometimes it's external. A mine you didn't detect. A torpedo you didn't see coming. A sonar ping that goes unanswered until the sea erupts around you. Maybe you had bad luck. Maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you were just due. You feel the moment, not the explosion, not at first. You feel the shift, the unnatural stillness. The way every man around you suddenly stops mid-sentence, mid-breath, mid-thought. Something's not right. The engines stutter, then die. The lights flicker once, twice, then steady into a dim, flickering hum that feels like candlelight at a funeral. Somewhere, something groans. Not the usual groan of a living machine, but a deep, pained noise, like metal realizing it's been asked to hold together for too long. The boat lists slightly, not much, but enough to send loose items skittering. A wrench clinks to the floor. A bowl tips over and rolls into a wall. No one moves, no one says it out loud, but everyone knows. You wait for the next sound, the rush of water, the sudden shudder, the creak that becomes a crack, but it doesn't come. Not right away. Instead, there's just silence. Not the kind you're used to, not the hum of submerged life, but real silence, cold, complete and final. You check your instruments out of habit. The numbers mean little now, but they give you something to do. Depth, 50 meters. Power, minimal. Propulsion, none. Air, diminishing. You're holding steady for the moment, but you're sinking in spirit, if not yet in body. The captain speaks softly, issuing orders that sound more like requests. Conserve power. Seal off non-essential compartments. Brace. Wait. Someone asks if they should send a distress signal. The radio operator hesitates. It's a risk. If you're still in enemy waters, broadcasting could invite more destruction. If no one's nearby, it's just wasted power. They argue about it in whispers, trying to decide whether dying loudly is better than dying quietly. Eventually, they transmit. Then you wait. Waiting is the worst part. You can survive for a while down here, technically. The hull is intact, mostly. The oxygen is thin but not gone. You sit on the floor, back to the wall, and listen to the creaks. They come at irregular intervals, like footsteps from a neighbour you're hoping won't knock. You hear a drip. You hear someone breathing too fast. You hear your own pulse. Nothing else. Rescue isn't impossible. In theory, another sub might hear your signal. A patrol boat might pick it up. Someone might drop a diving bell, or send down cables, or at least float above long enough to confirm you exist. But you've seen the statistics. You know what usually happens. There are too many submarines. Too few miracles. If the pressure doesn't get you, the air will. If the air doesn't, the cold will. And if none of that does, there's still the slow psychological slide into accepting it, into understanding that the steel around you will be your final address. You start thinking about home, not in the abstract way you used to. Not a daydream, not a hope. You remember details, the smell of wet leaves, the way your bed creaked, the sound your shoes made on the stairs. You try to picture the faces of people you loved, but they blur. Your brain is tired, starved of oxygen, or maybe just done. You imagine them being told. A letter, an officer at the door. We regret to inform you, lost at sea, no remains recovered. One man writes a note on the back of a maintenance checklist because it's the only paper available. He folds it, tucks it into a pocket, and doesn't say what it is. You don't ask. You think about writing one too, but stop. There's nothing you can say that hasn't already been said in 100 other submarines, by 100 other men, now lying at the bottom of the same ocean. Eventually, the air starts to sour. Someone lights a match. It doesn't catch. The rebreathers are still running, barely, but it's not enough. You all lie still. Not because you're calm, but because there's nothing left to do. Movement wastes breath. Speaking is pointless. You listen, one last time, for a knock on the hull, for a sonar ping, for anything, but all you hear is creaking. And somewhere in that sound, you recognise the truth you've been trying not to say. This may be the dive that doesn't end. Somehow, you make it back. The boat limps into port, scarred, dented, leaking in places it shouldn't. You're low on fuel, low on air, low on anything that could be called morale. But you're alive. That counts for something. You climb the ladder for what should feel like the last time, your boots clanking against the rungs as you emerge into daylight that feels too clean. You blink hard. The sky looks fake, too blue, too open. You feel smaller beneath it than you ever did beneath the sea. No one greets you. There are no cheers, no flags, no photographers eager to immortalise your haunted expressions. Just a few dock workers who barely glance up from their clipboards. They've seen it before. Another crew crawling back from the deep. Another boat that somehow didn't vanish. You touch dry land and half expect it to give beneath your feet. Solid ground feels like a betrayal. Steady in a way nothing should be anymore. You walk with a stiffness that isn't quite pain. Your legs remember the narrow corridors. Your spine still curves to avoid pipes that aren't there. You've lost weight, that much is obvious. Your uniform hangs off you like it was made for someone else. Your skin has gone pale in places and dark in others, sun-starved and oil-stained. Your hair has thinned. Not all at once, but in patches, uneven, like the boat took clumps of it with her on the way back up. Your fingernails are cracked. Your knuckles are raw. You've stopped noticing the smell. Not because it's gone, but because it's followed you ashore. You see your reflection in a piece of glass and barely recognise it. The eyes are yours, but they've sunk back in their sockets, ringed with fatigue that no amount of sleep could fix. You haven't shaved in weeks, maybe months. It doesn't matter. There's a look now, the U-boat look. Every returning sailor has it. Slack-faced, blinking, eyes darting toward noises that shouldn't matter anymore. Civilians notice it, but they don't understand. They stare for a second too long, and then look away, embarrassed by something they can't name. Some of your crewmates are missing. Not all of them made it. Some you watched die. Some disappeared during the chaos. Some were just gone one morning, taken out of their bunk, and carried away in silence. You remember their names, but try not to say them. Saying them makes them heavier. Saying them means remembering how they looked before the coughing started, before the burns, before the silence. There's no funeral. Just empty bunks and shared glances. A new crew will come. The old names will fade. You're given a few days of rest, though rest is generous. You lie in a real bed, under clean sheets, and stare at the ceiling like it's a periscope view. The silence is deafening. The stillness unnerves you. You keep expecting the floor to shift. You wake up every 2 hours, convinced something's leaking. The light is too steady. The air too fresh. You hate it. You miss the noise. You miss the pressure. You miss the boat, even though it nearly killed you. That's how it gets you. They don't ask if you're ready for another patrol. They don't have to. Your orders are already written. Another U-boat. Another set of coordinates. Another stretch of time measured in stale bread and sonar pings. You know you'll go. Not because you want to, but because the alternative is harder to explain. What would you even do up here? Who would understand you? You've become a creature of the deep. Surface life no longer fits. You tell yourself maybe this time will be different. Maybe it'll be a short patrol. Maybe you'll hit your targets and come home without needing to open the medical box or carry anyone to the storage locker. Maybe the torpedoes won't jam. Maybe the batteries will hold. You know it's a lie, but it's a necessary one. Lies are how the system stays lubricated. Everyone tells them. Everyone believes them. Otherwise, no one would ever get back on the boat. You drink too much during shore leave, not to celebrate. There's nothing to celebrate, just to slow your thoughts long enough to get through the night. You smoke more than you used to. You stop writing letters. There's nothing to say. You know they worry about you. You know someone's waiting, checking for your name in the paper. You don't know how to tell them that part of you never really came back. They patch up the boat, clean her, restock her, scrub out the stains, and repaint the hull. But you know she's still the same underneath, tired, strained, waiting to collapse, just like you. When you board again, she creaks like she remembers you. You nod back quietly and take your place. Same bunk, same boots, same silence. You survived. Your friends didn't. Your soul didn't. And the worst part, you know you'll keep going. You were always a number. From the first moment you stepped into uniform, from the second they wrote your name on a duty roster, you became part of a head count. Tallied, sorted, replaceable. The form said crewman, but it could have said loss projection. There were thousands like you, too many, and by the end far too few. Of the roughly 40,000 men who served aboard German U-boats during the war, more than 30,000 died. That's not a typo. That's not poetic exaggeration. That's reality. A survival rate so low, it would make a battlefield look merciful. You didn't know those numbers when you signed up. Or if you did, you didn't believe them. You told yourself you'd be in the lucky group. The small sliver that came back, maybe even with medals, a few stories to tell, a sense of purpose. But luck doesn't mean anything in the ocean. Skill matters, yes. Discipline matters. But so does which boat you're on, which patrol zone, which month, which malfunction, which split-second decision made by a man with tired eyes and just enough oxygen left to be dangerous. There's no pattern to who dies and who lives. Some of the best crews vanished without a trace. Some of the worst limped home, again and again, patched together with spit and spite. You might survive 5 patrols and die on the 6th, or the 1st. You might escape an airstrike only to choke on carbon monoxide in a calm sea. You might sleep through an attack that kills half your bunkmates and still wake up to do it again the next night. That's not strategy. That's arithmetic. The propaganda told you otherwise. They painted U-boat service as elite, noble, decisive, the cutting edge of naval warfare. What they didn't paint were the corpses, the wrecks, the months at sea with no kill and no hope, the suicides, the panic, the quiet descent of men who stared too long at rusted walls and started seeing things that weren't there. That didn't sell posters. That didn't look good in grainy newsreels. So they left it out. What you were sold was romance, brotherhood, patriotism, wrapped in diesel fumes and torpedo tubes. But the truth was rust and rot. The truth was mouldy bread and chemical air. The truth was knowing that if you went down, there was a good chance no one would ever find you. Not even a trace, not even a name on a wall. You'd just vanish into salt water and pressure, like so many others, folded into the seas in different memory. There's no monument for most of the men who died in U-boats. Some were buried at sea, quickly and without ceremony, slid off the hull like broken tools. Others sank inside their boats, still strapped to bunks, still gripping valve handles, lungs crushed before they could scream. Some were never identified. Some were miscounted. Some were simply erased by enemy fire, by friendly miscommunication, by bad maps and worse orders. And when they were gone, replacements were shipped in like spare parts. The boat didn't stop for mourning, it stopped for repairs. You came back, but not whole. You lost things down there. Friends, time, sleep. Some part of you stayed with the boat, buried beneath pressure and steel and silence. You walk through the world like a ghost now, breathing air that smells too fresh, hearing laughter that feels too loud. You look at people and think, they don't know, they never will. And you're glad for that, even as you resent them for it. Because how do you explain it? That you spent months listening for pings that meant death. That you shared a toilet with 50 men and considered it normal. That you came to prefer the sound of engines to your own thoughts. That you sometimes still hear creaking in your sleep. That you remember the names of the dead better than the faces of the living. How do you say all of that without sounding ungrateful? Without sounding broken? They told you it was about honour, about protecting something greater than yourself. But in the end, the sea doesn't care about honour. It doesn't care about your flag, your loyalty, or the slogan stitched onto your uniform. It doesn't care what you believed. It swallows you just the same, slowly or quickly, quietly or screaming. The ocean is patient. It has all the time in the world. You are not even a ripple. You didn't win the war. No one on your boat did. Maybe someone in Berlin called it a victory once, pointed at a map and circled a shipping lane like it meant something. But for you, it wasn't about winning. It was about surviving long enough to die somewhere else, preferably not in water. So yes, you made it. You survived. You beat the odds. But there's no glory in surviving. There's no medal for not going mad, no parade for holding your breath while the ceiling dripped. Just another mission, another patrol, another name added to the list of men who went under and didn't come back. And maybe one day, someone will say your name out loud. Maybe they'll read it from a roster in a dusty archive. Maybe they'll wonder what it was like, but the sea won't. It never did. That brings us to the end of tonight's video, a slow suffocation of steel and salt, not marked by victory, but by survival that cost too much. If you're still awake, thank you for submerging with me into a world where hope rusted faster than the hull. These are the stories that history leaves in the dark, quiet, claustrophobic, and largely unloved. If you'd like early access to more of these sunken memories and softly told catastrophes, plus ad-free audio and other perks, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment about which grim corners of the past you'd like to visit next. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find the show. Sleep well.